Hello, everyone, and welcome to Hospitality Talks. Today, we are going to be focused on Middle East. Middle East is rich in hydrocarbon assets. However, there has been a focus on travel and tourism sector with a widely shared strategic goal of diversifying away from hydrocarbon sector. With an excellent geographic location, cultural sites, world-class infrastructure and facility, the region has been one of the world's most competitive tourism destination for a global consumer base. Continued expansion of private sector through reforms, investments in local economy, attracting higher international tourist arrivals, and hosting of international events will further drive growth in the hospitality sector. With this growth, the industry continues to evolve, attracting different segments rather than just being focused on luxury markets. Along with that, the pandemic is changing the region's hospitality industry exponentially, where the follow-on effects will be felt for a long time to come. Our panelists today will help us understand the recovery status, industry sentiment, and new trends in the region. I'm Abid Butt. I'm here with my co-host, Sam-Erik. Sam.
Yes, I'm really excited about this discussion today with the panelists. I have a soft spot for the Middle East, having lived there for a few years, and I keep a close eye of developments. And the region is one of the most innovative and forward-thinking regions, and I'm excited to hear what has now happened and how we are moving forward the post-pandemic. So shall we bring the panelists to the screen?
Yes, please. So, Sam, we have a wonderful group of professionals with us today. First and foremost, Mark Dunford, who is partner and head of investments with Cavendish Maxwell. He's a business leader, been involved in the industry from strategic advisory point of view in commercial real estate sectors. In his current role, he oversees the investment and commercial agency activity with a focus on Middle East. He has dealt with Africa for the longest time, with Middle East, so a person with a very deep knowledge and understanding. We also have joined us today Amit Nayak, who is Vice President and Board Member of Hospitality Asset Managers Association for Middle East and Africa. He has been involved in asset management in hospitality for a long period of time with some large owning entities in the region and has a fabulous understanding on operations and asset management in Middle East related to hospitality industry. And last but certainly not least, Michael Zager, who's the Chief Operating Officer of Hospitality Management Holdings. Again, a long-term industry professional with global involvement in the industry. In his current capacity as CEO of HMH, Michael is responsible to further grow the largest dry sector operator with its 5 brands spanning from luxury to budget. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us. Welcome to Hospitality Talks.
Thanks.
So if Mark, if it's okay, we'll have you lead us out for the discussion. Let's talk from broader perspective in the region. Talk a little bit about the recovery trends. Talk about what markets are performing like, and what do you see the status of the industry today?
Thanks for having me, firstly. And Sam, for a minute there, I thought you were going to say you had a soft spot for your panelists when you said you were excited about this session, but in the end, it was the Middle East. So I'm a little bit disappointed about that. But we'll move on from that. I think, the Middle East is quite a diverse place, and obviously I've been dealing with Africa and the Middle East for a while now. And so when people sort of say the Middle East, it breaks down obviously further into different markets. If we kind of focus on the UAE, I think what we've seen in the UAE is what we're going to see to an extent in continental Europe and the US come summertime and come high vaccination rates, where domestic tourism is really going to push leisure rate and occupancy. So I'm a big believer that the destinations you can drive or train to in Europe and the US, and in fact, we saw it with some of the Chinese holidays earlier this year in China. The domestic tourism really drove that leisure segment, and the same has been true here in the UAE. So, a lot of resorts in RAK and Abu Dhabi, and even here in Dubai on the Palm, the beachside hotels have actually done pretty well considering, due to staycations on the weekends, or even people taking the school holidays off and just driving down to Ras Al Khaimah and taking a couple of days of leave down there. So I think the leisure segment in markets where there's a strong enough domestic base, you'll see pretty strong and pretty quick recovery, and we're already seeing that in the UAE. I think markets like Egypt, where they depend a lot, particularly the leisure destinations on the coast, the Hurghadas and those sorts of locations that require the continental European charter flights to bring in tourists, I think are the ones that are going to take a little bit longer to recover, because A, you need the flights to come back, but B, you need the tourists to be willing to get on the flights, and also a lot of the government restrictions on occupancy are still in place. So even if you did have the flights coming in, you could only run at 50% occupancy or whatever it is. So they're really struggling, but not as much as the corporate segment. I think the corporate segment is the one that's really hurting. And obviously we'll get a bit of insight, or better insight from Michael and Amit. I mean, I'm more focused on the kind of investment side of things, but obviously try to keep a finger on the pulse from an operating perspective.
So, Mark, talk a bit about some of the structural vulnerabilities that might have shown up in our sector. Anything that comes to mind that needs to be changed, and particularly if you put your investment lens on this sector, anything that you see that needs to be changed to make this sector more resilient? Hopefully we'll never have to deal with another pandemic, and we're going to all vote to make you responsible for that. But anything that any structural issues that you've seen?
Well, I think the investment in hospitality is an interesting one, because if you're looking at it purely from a kind of institutional yield perspective, particularly if you're looking here in the UAE and to an extent the rest of the Middle East, there's a lot of boxes that need to be ticked in order for something to be transactable. Let's put it that way. There's land ownership restrictions here. A lot of the assets that have been built here historically have been kind of upper end of the kind of tier levels. So it's more kind of luxury or at least upscale hotels. So big build costs, big shiny things. So the investment cost initially was very high, and very few leases in this market, and I think that in itself has scared off a lot of investors in the past. And now, given what's happening with COVID and COVID, even in Europe, for example, hotels that were leased, the tenants who were leasing those hotels had kind of factored a worst case scenario of getting to, maybe let's say 80% of your rent in a terrible year. But then COVID came along and all of a sudden you got to zero. For a few months, obviously it wasn't a full year, but still, I think that's had a huge impact on investor sentiment. The big secondary piece to that is the financing piece. Obviously, there's a certain amount of asset risk that's been highlighted by the fact that COVID really wipes out tourism or any other such big pandemic would have an effect like this if planes stop flying and people get locked down by their governments. So banks are sort of saying, well, if I've got the choice of lending on something like, I don't know, logistics is a very hot asset class at the moment. So if you know that cold storage is going to be hugely in demand and be leased to a big supermarket chain that's only going to do better if lockdown tightens, then you're much more likely to be willing to finance something like that, where there's a 10, 15, 20-year lease to a reputable supplier in the F&B space, and versus a hotel that could overnight have the lights switched off and then you're left kind of holding the baby. So I think that's one big bit of it, and the other bit is the valuation piece, right? It's I don't envy the valuations guys in any of these firms, because it's very difficult. Your owner's saying, well, I spent X $100 million or whatever it is building this thing, and now you're turning around to me and telling me that it's certainly if you do if you use a DCF method, it's not worth a huge amount of money right now, regardless of which property you are. So if you're an investor, and investors in large hospitality assets have the option to not necessarily invest in a specific market, so they can invest globally, and we've seen it every time. Subprime was the same. There's this kind of flight to safety. We've seen it more recently with what's been going on in Hong Kong the last couple of years, with what's been going on in Lebanon. The money wants to go to continental Europe or to the UK, where they feel, yes, the yields are very keen, but there's a certain amount of security there. I've literally had investors say to me, look, while I appreciate I can buy almost an identical asset with the same tenant in it, with the same lease in the UAE for 8% and in Europe for 4%, at least I know that when I come to exit in 7-8 years or whatever it is, that there's some sort of security around that yield being roughly the same when I exit, versus the UAE or the Middle East in general, where that yield could have gone could go much higher. So there's that kind of supply risk, and obviously a certain amount of political risk as well. I think although it's a very stable country here in the UAE, the region as a whole has its kind of its own challenges from a political perspective.
Yep. Well, look, all those things taken into account, certainly investors would possibly underwrite these deals at a higher risk. Have there been many transactions in the last year in the region that you know of, Mark?
The short answer to that is no. And I think the reason is that there hasn't been a huge amount of transactions in the Middle East and Africa over the last, since COVID struck, really, because the banks have been very good, the financiers have been very good. Obviously, they weren't as exposed as they were back in 2008. A lot of stuff's been put in place since then to ensure that they wouldn't have the same sort of risk as they had back then. So they're not as underwater as they were, if at all, and they've been very reasonable with their borrowers. So we haven't seen a huge amount of distress yet. Sure, there are NPLs out there. Here in the Middle East, it's not quite as vanilla as in Asia, Europe, or the US, typically, where the more developed markets, if something's not performing in the bank, there's a risk that the bank will come calling. In this part of the world, there's typically asset owners are pretty diversified, and there's other things that they can offset that loan with, or there's conversations that can be had with the lenders to kind of draw out that conversation. So there hasn't been that much pressure yet put on owners to exit. And again, like I said, there's challenges here in the region regarding finding buyers for these things. For the bid-ask spread is pretty big, because like I said, these guys spend a lot of money building these things. They don't want to sell them at a fraction of that price. And also there's restrictions on who can buy what where. So it's not quite that easy. There's a lot of owners who are willing to exit their assets, to be sure, but it's just a question of buyers willing to pay the price that they would be happy to sell at.
Mark, a lot of the sovereign wealth funds in the region, they have been heavy investors in our industry for a very long time, and they are indeed global investors. Do you think that focus might shift to more regional investments? And are there opportunities? Are there investment grade assets that either are available today or might become available in the future?
That's a good question. I mean, to be sure that most of the sovereign investors in this region have invested in their backyard. The Mubadalas and Aldars and ICDs have typically invested primarily in their backyard. Some of them haven't even actually left their emirate or the country. Some of them have. Obviously, ICD invest in hotels overseas and have done. I think the and I'm sure Amit will have something to say about this, but there's a lot of talk about them looking at multifamily or industrial warehousing in Europe and the States and the UK, whatever it is, but there hasn't been a huge amount of money going out just yet from this part of the world into the hotel assets at the moment in Europe and stuff. Having said that, they're all very keen on distressed stuff. If it does come up, I think there's going to be quite a lot of buyers out there with money when pricing does come down to a sensible level. Regionally, yes, certainly. I think that's the easy step to take. I think, if you're a sovereign wealth group out of the UAE and you want to start growing overseas, you could be buying stuff in Saudi much more easily than taking the step of going to Africa or Europe. I mean, Africa is an interesting one, and to an extent, some of the neighboring countries here have the same issue in terms of the scale of assets available on the market in terms of investment grade assets, right? There just isn't that much product out there for these guys to buy. And certainly, to move to somewhere like Africa, a lot of these investors would be looking for some sort of platform, and there's only a limited amount of options for them out there, and again, even more, right?
So I'll turn it over to Sam here in a bit, but one last question: are there alternative investors? For example, is institutional money looking at Middle East as a market? Are there private equity companies? Are there hedge funds that might be looking to invest in this sector? Because obviously pandemic has presented an opportunity, though, as you mentioned, the bid-ask spread seems to be very wide, and I'm not sure if it'll ever come to a point that the transactions can be more lucrative. But any thoughts on non-traditional investors, if I may use that technology, for the region?
I'm going to be a politician about that, about that question, and say, for me, the non-traditional investors in hospitality real estate here in the UAE, and it's not so much the case in Saudi, because there's a lot of Saudis, private Saudis who invested in stuff. But here in the UAE, a lot of the investment has been, well, pretty much all of it has been either sovereign or very wealthy local families. And I think and I'm starting to have these conversations, or I have been having these conversations, is wealthy family groups from the subcontinent or from Asia looking this way, and potentially looking at those opportunities. The issue is one around yield and pricing, basically, because to compensate for that perceived risk. I mean, the one thing here in this part of the world is there is a lot of vacant land, and so that much like the the resi market. Although the resi market, by the way, just as an aside, has had a great rebound here in the UAE. I think there's a lot of foreigners who've come here over the Christmas period and seen the benefits of the UAE and have bought resi here, as well as people moving into the villa market. The apartment market's struggling, but I think the same view of, well, there's kind of an unlimited amount of supply that could potentially be developed here, is a big risk for a lot of these larger institutional investors. And so until we see yields move out into the double digits, I don't know if we're going to see that many institutions coming in from overseas.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that, Mark. Let me turn it over to Sam, and I'll be back with you in a moment. Sam.
Yes, sure. Mark, can we continue a little bit on that foreign investment discussion? And what do you, for those who are possibly eyeing their opportunity to invest in the region, could you just share some thoughts on the advantages, and then you already touched on the challenges, but give some advantages and maybe some additional on the challenge side?
Well, I mean, a huge advantage of the UAE is that it's a tax haven. It's a very sophisticated and stable market for a lot of reasons. So, if you're thinking about developing an asset somewhere, here things will happen on time as planned. The government piece in terms of licensing and process is extremely straightforward. I've lived in a lot of places. I have numerous passports, and I've lived all over the world, including Switzerland. The opposite ends of the spectrum are sort of Switzerland and Kenya, and the Bahamas. And this is by far the most efficient government process system I've ever seen. And just the vaccination rollout in itself has been incredible. And getting necessary approvals and license and transfer of titles and all that sort of stuff is just so simple here. So, that's a huge positive if you're looking at investing in this market. Is the currency is pegged to the dollar, so there's no worry there from a forex risk. You get the tax breaks. Connectivity is second to none with Emirates and Etihad. Everybody the risk of people doing something dubious in any process or being overly difficult is close to zero. So there's a lot of benefits, and I think specifically from a tourism perspective, that connectivity and vaccination piece are going to be increasingly important going forward. I just heard on the radio on my way home this evening that 125 vaccines per 100 people have been issued now. So that shows you what and it's number one in the world now in terms of the number of people that have been double vaccinated against COVID. I just as an aside, I find it quite amusing when people sort of say, and I don't mind if you don't want to get vaccinated, don't get vaccinated, but I find it quite amusing when people are sort of saying, well, I don't want to get a vaccination passport or whatever it is. And yet, if you want to travel around Africa or even parts of Asia or Latin America, you're going to have gone to your local doctor and got 3 or 4 different jabs if you're a European or American, just to be able to travel down there. And you didn't ask who manufactured them and how they've been stored and all that sort of stuff. You just went and got them so you could go on holiday. And now that we're saying, well, you've got to get one of these jabs, it's a massive drama. I arrived in Nairobi once with a valid yellow fever certificate, and they turned around to me at the airport and said, "Nah, we think this is fake. We're going to give you another jab." And I said, "Sure, why not? I haven't had one in a couple of years. I'll take it." And they gave me a vaccine on the spot in Nairobi airport at 2 a.m. And I live to tell the tale. So, and when I was born in Africa 40 years ago, who knows what they were, sticking in my arm as a baby, and it's probably the same needle across the whole hospital, So I wasn't sitting there going, "Oh, well, no, if it's not AstraZeneca, I'm not having it." It was just, here you go, this is what you get, buddy. So, I'm very kind of gung-ho about the vaccination situation.
Yeah. Now, the industry as a whole, the hospitality investment industry, what changes has happened now during the pandemic, and if there has been some changes, what do you think will stay the post-pandemic period?
Well, I think there's going to be even more scrutiny of deals, particularly when it comes to leases. What's been quite interesting also, well, the covenant strength of a lease, let's put it that way. Um, I think also what's been interesting in the F&B space is because I oversee the leasing team at Camax as well, and it's been quite a learning curve for me on the commercial leasing side of things because that's not a background I had. But F&B operators turning around and saying we're not going to pay for fit out, and we'd quite like to not pay a fixed rent either. We'll do a turnover rent, and you pay for fit out as the landlord. And landlords are starting to accept that. So it's more of a kind of HMA type structure, but in the F&B space. And hotels also sort of saying, yeah, we need to diversify our or de-risk our revenue to an extent. And so a lot more operators talking about outsourcing their F&B space to a third party operator who will then hopefully pay them a fixed rent. And also just, make the hotel more of a destination, more of an attractive F&B destination. Because if you've got a vanilla hotel XYZ brand, I'm not going to name a brand because they're all friends of mine. I don't want to get shot. But if you've got XYZ brand, a Beats hotel, and you've just got a generic F&B space downstairs, all day dining, whatever, a Beats all day dining extravaganza, versus having a Hard Rock Cafe or whatever it is. You're not going to drive external F&B or even internal F&B as well as you potentially could. So I think that's one shift I've seen that I found quite interesting.
Yeah, my final and short question is that, like here in Europe, and particularly in Northern Europe, we have this third-party operators. Hotel management agreements are out of the question over here. Do you see this? Any views on that for the Middle East region? Is that the time for that kind of agreement setups with hotels?
Yeah, Banny's going to shoot me for not having mentioned him before, I think. But yeah, there are these third-party operators that, again, people often forget that the Middle East, and again, we're talking generically, but the UAE is very much part of the Middle East, and maybe it's ahead of the rest of the markets in this region, but it is still an emerging market. We're not at the same stage that Europe and the US are, or Japan for that matter. And so, Africa is a step below on the curve. The UAE and the Middle East are a step above. You can just look out of my window and see all the cranes and know, that this is still an emerging market. And so, I think what we're seeing in the developed markets is filtering down here. And so, yes, those third-party operators sandwiched between a franchise agreement and an owner, I think that we could see more of that going forward. And it kind of replaces the role of the asset manager to an extent, right? I mean, if you build that relationship with the operator, the third-party wide brand operator, and then put a franchise on top, it's quite a good model. I mean, you need to be a little bit careful in structuring that. Because obviously you need to make sure there's enough fees to go around, enough revenue to go around. The last thing you want to do is end up with something that's more costly to the owner. But yeah, definitely something we're seeing more of. And Aleph, I'm giving them a shout out. Vanny, you can send me a check in the mail. They've been growing quite aggressively throughout. It's obviously a tough year for them last year, but they seem to be doing really well. So
great. Well, thank you, Mark. And back to you, Abid.
So, Mark, one last question before we bring our next guest up.
Hang up if you don't get on to him soon, buddy. I would.
Is it survival for the industry, or is it time to rebuild and build resilience into the industry? And what do we do to get there?
Wow, good question. I mean, I think particularly there's been a bit of a diversification in terms of the segments that they're looking to attract. So, Ras Al Khaimah is very much going for the leisure segment, and as a result, they've done very well through the pandemic. They're not trying to be another Dubai. In Dubai, we've seen people like Rove emerge and be very successful. I think there's certainly space in there for the kind of leisure, mid to lower end leisure market, the young couples, rather than the wealthy families or wealthy couples. I think young couples from source markets coming here to stay at a Rove at less than $100 a night. I think there's certainly a big market for that, just to kind of push volume into the retail and entertainment that places like Dubai offers. I'm not going to throw Aradna under the bus like I said I would, regarding who's going to pay all these big salaries that she wants us to pay in the industry, because margins are very thin already as they are. So I think I totally agree that, and I sat on the board of Utalii College in Kenya, which is the largest hotel school in Africa, for 3 years. I did a full board term there, and I agree that the industry doesn't pay very well, but there is a huge population out there that is aspiring to get into the industry, even in the service jobs that aren't necessarily overly well paid, but it is still a massive employer. And even here in Dubai, you see the Kenyans and the East Africans that have come up here from Utalii College to work in the industry. So unless we're going to completely rethink things and say we're going to price an extra 20% higher because we're going to pay our staff 20% higher, and consumers are willing to just swallow that price jump on the back of being socially responsible, then it's not as easy to unpack as just sort of saying, well, we need to pay people more.
Well, fair enough. And hold that thought. We'll come back together, and we need to banter that a little more because I think industry is in a bit of a pickle right now. But I'm sure Michael would have a lot of input for that. Thank you for all your input. Mark, please stay with us. We'll have you back. Sam, if it's okay, let's bring Amit in and let's see what asset management is all about. Amit, thanks for being with us.
Hey, Amit, thanks for having me over. I think we are in an interesting time in our lives, and I hope, like you mentioned, we don't see to enjoy this kind of a change or a paradigm shift in the way business is conducted again. Middle East as a whole, I think, has done pretty well.
Amit, before you go there, if I may, sorry to interrupt
Please.
you. We've just barely learned how to manage hotels. What is asset management all about? Is it a pure hocus pocus? Is there something to it?
Thank God no one I work for is listening to this. Asset management, I think, in perspective, is all about checks and balances. Yeah, it's about people who know the business, who have been managing hotels in operations, going back on a different side, looking at transactions, what value those transactions bring into the business, and as well as how the teams that are being given to manage these hotels, how they assist us, how we can assist them, how can we support them in the best practices that we know between different asset classes that we own, as well as between different operators that we own and we work with. And I think this is the mix of asset management, or what asset management is all about.
So as with the focus on asset management, thank you for sharing that, because it's a new discipline that quite candidly people still haven't understood the value of it. From an asset manager's lens and your peer group in the region particularly, what things are you guys focused on for this recovery?
I think the start of it, every day we check, is what new destinations have airlift moving into the region. I think the most looked up for is the UK destination as a destination where all the key areas or locations in the Middle East, we have significant airlift coming out of UK and going into UK, which is big business for every sector, be it the finance, be it hospitality, be it real estate. There is this cross-border relationship is very important. So this is something is very keen as a focus for all of us. How much of the airlift that is coming up, government regulations, how we are able to manage the pandemic on our side, and how do we look at this as a complete reset, and we start as a zero base on our cost, on our revenues, on everything else. And it's as if we are reopening the industry as a whole once again.
So I think that's a great point. Let's spend a little more time on the reset. And Mark was talking about some of the changes from investment point of view. From operating side of things, and you have a great vantage point in the entire market as in Middle East. Talk about some of the changes, some of the seismic changes that will remain in the industry, and things that we have learned as a result of this pandemic.
Okay, so HAMA as an association represents roughly around owners of 700 hotels within the region. So that's a lot of bandwidth when it comes to cross-border relationships, understanding of what we are doing, say, in Dubai with an asset versus Ras Al Khaimah versus the holy cities of Makkah, Medina, or be it in Riyadh, Jeddah, or Muscat. One of the key aspects in this is also to realize that as an industry, some of the factors that affect us directly are our fixed costs and how do we manage those fixed costs relatively. So be it talking to government entities about utilities, to talk to the companies that we work with on other labor or other challenges that we face, or it is just our pure operations, working with the operators, which has been very keen, and we have been, it's been a challenging time even for them from a P&L perspective. So how do we work together on cash flows, working with the banks as institutions, because in the end of the day, a lot of the business that we work with is with the debt. So the equity portion of it has gotten wiped out with all the hotels being closed. So how do we manage the debt that we have with them? And this has been very crucial for us as an industry.
Are hotels in general, are they able to service their debt these days? Have there been programs that the government might have subsidies issued out for some of the hotel owners so that they can weather the storm?
So I think overall within the market, the banks and the governments have worked closely together to ensure that there is liquidity in the business. With regards to servicing of debt, at least of, let's call them friends and family that we know of, they have been able to manage it. Something Mark had touched upon is that most of the hospitality business owners here, they are quite diversified. So hospitality is one aspect of the business. So that makes a big difference. A lot of the banks have vested interest within hospitality because for them, sustainability of this business is very important as a city or a country initiative. So this is where the government have assisted big time. Just in UAE itself, if I have to take a number, there was almost 73 billion dirhams of support that was given to the banking industry in order to support the other allied industries that were part and parcel of the ecosystem.
Fabulous. Okay. One more question, and I'll hand it over to Sam. Any innovations that are new to the industry as a result of the pandemic that will help us be more efficient? Mark had talked about the labor challenges. It's consistent throughout that. Where do you find the skills and that sort of stuff? Any thoughts on innovations that will be implemented as we are on our way to recover?
Interestingly, when we looked at all our P&Ls as a whole, the biggest things that stuck out is all our utilities and POMEC. And this is something that we looked into very deeply when we look at operational hotels. But when you close a hotel, everything gets skewed. And these are the aspects that stand out a lot. So all the innovations that we have seen in the last 12 to 18 months have been focused about how we can manage, maintain, and elevate and make these systems more efficient, because quite a few of these are very old legacy systems that just kept being built up. Everybody was very busy building hotels, and innovation on these aspects were not looked upon. But now when you look at the life cycle of all these assets and you're looking at refurbishments, etc., this is one of the aspects that everybody is very focused on. And be it energy management systems, be it guest management systems, but which are more focused on how do we protect the asset even when they are closed, and anything and everything to do with this aspect of fixed cost. I think the key innovation has come through this.
Fabulous. Well, thank you for that, Amit. Let me hand it over to Sam, and I'll be back with you in a moment. Sam.
Thank you. Amit, maybe we can continue on the topic you mentioned about the role of technology. What are some sort of a technology that has now been introduced and maybe invested in because of the changes that you see been happening?
I think with regards to POMEC, I mentioned a few of these systems. One of the key aspects is also analytics. How do you look at dashboards and everything else, but more holistically from every aspect of the P&L and live. These have become more and more prominent here. Keep in mind as well, in Dubai, if I can take it as an example, a lot of investment has gone into startups and the incubation of startups here. You already have government-funded 5 incubation hubs, which have brought out a lot of interesting systems and processes or companies that support us with that. And we have always tested these products into the hotels that are part of the membership. And we have seen this elevate a lot. And these, one of the examples I can give you is a company that looked at enhancing the content and the content management on the online systems, which earlier was not that much of a focus. Relations with the OTAs have enhanced, so a lot of the OTA management systems on our back of houses have enhanced because of that. And we have been in very close touch and talks with the OTA, some of the biggest OTA platforms. Talk about some distribution systems. I think one thing we lose out in these conversations is F&B. F&B has been a very driving force when you're looking at a staycation market. And a lot of the biggest hotels here, we have had some amazing, innovative local companies that have come out. And this has basically elevated the hotels as well and the deliveries of these hotels, because F&B as a key action point as an industry was something that was always missed out, because I always believe restaurateurs and hoteliers are two different mixes of the same pie, and it has to be looked at differently as well. And this has been very important and key. Yeah, and many more to come.
Yeah. Now, I find it interesting also that during the pandemic, some well-known restaurants have added a sort of a cloud kitchen or whatnot on the other side of Dubai in order to cater for the takeaway. So they deliver if you're living in, let's say, DIFC and your restaurant is located there, but on the other side of Dubai, you have people who have been before coming to that restaurant, but things were closed, so they have opened up actually a kitchen closer so they can deliver efficiently to the customer. And I thought that's a very innovative idea that I have heard about in Dubai.
100%. I think F&B as an industry moved very strongly during this time. You have more restaurants, you have more experiences. We have had, a whole bunch of restaurants that have opened in the middle of the desert in certain very nice, quaint locations where earlier no one would have thought of it being a business model. But in the last 6 to 8 months of good weather, people have all been all over the place. Some of the uber luxury resorts always have done better, but then that has also opened us a lot of key markets across the city and the country. And this goes across board, in be it you talk about Qatar, be it Saudi, the remote luxury hotel business or F&B business has grown more than anything else. And these were markets that were not that, they were very unique as a value proposition, but now they have become, there's a waiting list for people to go there.
Yeah. My final question is, I'm particularly interested about the Middle East and UAE, is the development of different styles of hotels for the different markets. And we talk very much over here in Europe about experiential travelers who want to, they insist when they travel, they want to have an experienced location, they are keen on green values, they're keen on sustainability. Where do you see this happening in the region where you are at?
This is very strong in every tourism board's value chain, in every in Dubai and in Abu Dhabi. In Dubai you have the Dubai municipality, and I think the green certification and the green panel is very strong. So we have been as HAMA very much involved with all the entities in developing the new codes, the new building systems and checks and balances that is needed, and how as hospitality we want to promote sustainability as a whole. And this has been very key into every engagement that we do and every development that we're looking for. This is the value metrics, because like I started this conversation with respect to how we looked at our fixed cost, and that was the key driver for everything, is because if you can save any money that on that, it just has a direct flow through.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you, Amit, for sharing this, and over to you, Amit.
Thank you. Amit, one more question before I bring our next guest in. Talk a little bit about the booking patterns. Are there differences today than there were pre-pandemic? Are people booking further out? It's very short term. What are you seeing in also that would lead to performance of different classes of hotels? Is one class performing better than the other?
Okay, so two different things. This is the most fun that we have every day, is about understanding booking patterns, and there is no thumb rule to it anymore. Earlier, just to put some touch points, during the season, the booking window would be anything between 30 to 90 days. Off season would be anything between 2 weeks to maybe 3 weeks maximum. Today, we are looking at booking windows of 2 to 3 days. Weekends, sometimes maybe even just one. So booking window and patterns are totally skewed. One of the key points is, again, airlift. Any city, any country, like for example, recently Saudi opened its borders. Within a matter of 3 to 4 hours, most of our booking windows changed. And these are the major challenges that we face, even with how we take care of our employees, how we manage business, how we manage stocks, all of our capital expenses, any renovation, redevelopment, anything that we're doing in. These booking patterns are not helping us as of now. But I think we need to take what comes to us. We are very privileged in this part of the world to enjoy these first world problems, which would be that we have business on the books, our hotels are open, they are doing well, our F&B is sustaining itself, is doing way better than what we were doing in 2019 as well. And we have to enjoy this. When it comes to the category or segmentation of hotels, one of the categories that always did well as a whole, but has gone through the roof, is the uber luxury hotels. Key destination hotels, small boutique hotels, they have done well. If you are as an inventory or a mix, if you are a villa hotel, you can be in the middle of the desert, and we have a couple of them here. They have done better than any of the beach assets, because there was privacy, there was a beautiful pool, you connected with nature, it was peaceful, especially with the pandemic and all the white noise around it. I think that kind of serenity had a dollar value to it, and people were ready to pay that. Then comes luxury, but even in luxury, there were two different aspects. One was the beach hotels. The beach hotels did fantabulously well across board, across all the cities within Middle East. If you were on the beach, if you did not do well, there was something very wrong with the way you managed your business, because most of them trended extremely high. City hotels, there was a lot of change in the way we sold our city hotels. Mostly we sold them as urban resorts, because you had a lot of pools, you had a lot of F&B, and those did well. The hotels which were very corporate within the city hotel dynamics, those were the ones that were challenged. The rest of them, it all depends on the pricing. The rest of the budget hotel or the 5-star upscale hotels, the challenge or the opportunity was all based on pricing. If you priced your hotel well, people are more than happy to get out of the house, go spend a weekend or a couple of days or work in a hotel, enjoy the F&B, enjoy the pool, and it worked very well for us.
Well, thank you, Amit. Thank you for all that insight. Please stay with us. We will have you back shortly. But at this point, let's bring Michael Zager in. And Michael, thanks for your time.
Thank you. Good afternoon, good evening, or wherever you are in the world. And I just realized you put us in a nice order. You started with the investors, with Mark, who makes the promises to the owners, and get the developers going. Then you put Amit on the case, asset management, controlling the whole thing. And as usual, operations has to keep the promise and perform. So thank you for that.
Well, Michael, it's Mark sells the dream. You have to service the nightmare. So hence your role. Let's look. The industry stats are pretty encouraging in the region, but I'm going to continue on to what Amit was mentioning relative to performance of the hotels in your portfolio. Can you corroborate some of the stuff that Amit was talking about as to booking patterns and what hotels have performed better than the others?
Yeah, I mean, the booking performance and the booking pattern has changed. It became shorter over the years, and now since the pandemic, it's completely out of the window. I mean, nothing is as it was. Everything is reinventing itself. And so we have looked at this year. We learned from 2020 big time and said, okay, this year is all about rebuilding the business, looking at it from a complete different standpoint. It's almost like I said today to someone, it's almost like Formula One. 21 is the qualifying, kind of trying out everything, what's performing best, and then getting back to to achieving the pole position when the race is on in 22. So you mentioned we're in the same boat, but I would say we're not in the same boat. We're in the same storm, but in different boats. But everybody is paddling towards the same direction.
Well, that's a great analogy, and I'll definitely have to remember that. Talk a bit about the demographics of your clients. Are they shifting in any way? The feeder markets that your hotels host, are they different today than they were pre-pandemic?
Oh yeah, completely. I mean, Dubai and the UAE is the 5 top feeder markets. They're completely out of the window. I mean, India, we know, has big challenges at the moment. We have Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, almost 10% normally producing. They were closed until last week. No travel in, no travel out. Not even for Saudis themselves. UK, no travel corridor whatsoever. Then we have China. China is locked up. And I had an ATM virtual call yesterday with a gentleman, president he's a public speaker and president of the Chinese Investment Forum. He said so far 510 million Chinese people have been vaccinated, and nobody can leave the country until at least 80% are vaccinated. And then they will visit only countries that are safe to travel, easy access, value for money, and welcoming to Chinese business. So I think UAE is perfectly positioned for that. So I really think business will be back next year and ramping up slowly. We have in our hotels in Ajman, in Sharjah, the Northern Emirates. We're lucky enough the last 6 weeks, we were between 96 to 100% full. When I talk to my colleagues in Europe, they nearly fall off the chair when they hear these numbers. And we can be fortunate that, the Northern Emirates, they had no no lid, no cap, whereas Dubai went from 60 to 80. And during the ATM last week, it was announced that Dubai can be back to 100% occupancy at the hotels. So the Russian market is in, Ukrainian market, so the CIS countries, because they're also vaccinated. They have different approach on travel. They love the Emirates. So yeah, nothing is as it was. We had 20% from Europe, not coming. We had 16% from Asia and Dubai, not coming. 7% from US, not coming. So almost 45% is not traveling anymore. So you need to live off the other 55%, and they're also limited.
So, Michael, you just participated in Arabian Travel Mart, and hats off to the industry for putting the first big event together. Tell us, what was the sentiment like? What were the buyers thinking about? What kind of conversations were you having?
It was very positive. First of all, it was less exhibitors, less visitors. However, it gave the ones that participated a better exposure. You had wider corridors, you had prominent stands, you had more time to speak with the individual business partners. I did 4 or 5 press interviews, on our new openings. We're opening a hotel, Ecos Hotel in Al Fawjan near the Expo site. So people are interested to say, hey, during this climate, you're opening hotels. You're having a big stand. We see the consistency, and I think this is for us giving it back to the hospitality, giving it back to the United Arab Emirates, how they dealt with this crisis. And I always say, 50% of a crisis happens in people's head, and 50% on the ground. So let's work on the 50% that we can control. And I think ATM was a great platform to work on those 50%. And everyone was really positive. Nobody had their heads down. I went and visited other ATM occasions when there was a bit negativity and people were very concerned. But this time I saw there's a new dawn. There's a new there's a new movement coming.
Well, that's fabulous. A bit of optimism is very, very important to keep things going, and the world is indeed headed in the right direction. We still have a long ways to go, but definitely we headed in the right direction. Let me hand it over to Sam, Michael, and I'll be back with you in a moment. Sam.
Yes, Michael, that's nice to hear what you told us about the ATM. During this time of the pandemic and now when the hotels are open, in what way have you seen that their customer expectations may have changed, and how have you responded to that?
Well, our guests, what they want, and we're talking mainly about the leisure business, they want an experience. They have been locked up for months or almost, you can say, years. It's people have the money, they have the time, they have the motivation, and if they get a chance to hop on the plane, they will. I just flew in a day before the ATM from Frankfurt, from Germany. The plane was a 777 from Emirates. The plane was 90% full. And I was one of a few corporate travelers, and the rest were millennials, were people you could see they had the rucksack, they had the camera, they had they had all the stuff that you were not seeing for a long time, and they were eager to get an experience. So what we need to deliver is the experience. They're concerned about hygiene, of course, about safety, security, but will I still get my experience? And I think Dubai has done a great job in ticking all these boxes. Obviously, you can only hop on a plane with your negative PCR test. But even if you would not have that, or you need a second one, there is at Dubai Arrivals, there are, I don't know how many, 30, 40 booths where you could have another test. You have a great welcome at the immigration. You wear the mask. There is social distancing in place. So the disinfection protocols at the hotels. I mean, before we were always, as operators, hiding housekeeping. Clean the lobby at night, do the lifts at night, and everything was spotless. It's not that we were not cleaning the rooms or having exceptional cleanliness in place before the pandemic. We're doing the same, but now there's another layer on top of it, which is disinfection. Okay, that might not have happened before to that extent, almost clinical, like in the hospital. But now it's not just important that you do your job, it's important to be seen doing the job. So it's perfectly acceptable and even expected that you see housekeepers with the mask, with the rubber gloves, walking through the lobby with the spray bottle, cleaning and wiping surfaces. So we're doing what we can. We're sealing rooms almost as if you think, I've only seen this in the detective stories. It's a crime scene and you put seals on doors. Now we put this for every clean room. Yeah, but people, this is the new normal and we have to do this. We need to sell on top of the experience. We need to sell the security level to give them peace of mind.
Yeah. And then my final question is relating to technology implementation in your hotels. I have seen now, particularly because of the pandemic now, the customers are expecting keyless access. In fact, they're even using their own mobile device to turn on TVs or close the curtains. How far are you in that, and where do you see that going, in which direction?
Well, this has elevated and just sped up the whole process. We're implementing all this at our newest hotel near the expo site. There is, we call it the digital guest journey, which is actually from the booking to when the guest is leaving, being in touch with the guest and trying to return us into a repeat business. Online check-in. Touchless interaction at the hotel, ordering of food or any items, opening the door with your phone, being in touch, chatting with the guest over social media. All this is the new normal, and at the newest hotel we're running, which is a millennial-minded hotel, which has a games room, which has a laundrette, which has features that you would normally think you find in a spacey hotel. But the reality is the future has landed. We're here today. The pandemic has, if there's one good thing that it has taught us, is go digital, go touchless. You need to elevate yourself into the 21st century.
Yeah, very good. Well, thank you. And perhaps, Abid, you can continue with your questions.
Michael, look into the future for us, if you would, and talk about future of tourism in the region. I know there are lots of large events, World Expo, World Cup in Qatar. Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is spending a lot of focus and emphasis on travel and tourism. What do you think this industry will be like, and what is the future in the region?
Again, I think tourism and hospitality will be back pretty quick. It's a very resilient industry. Hoteliers are the most creative and resilient people on the planet. They can make something out of nothing. And I think we have in the region, we have all the ingredients for the recipe for success to cater the world. And you just named a few of them. You have the World Expo, you have the World Cup coming. Dubai is a huge marketing machine, with all the new initiatives and the destination that they're building, with AIM Dubai, with the world's biggest Ferris wheel, which is topping the the London Eye. I mean, there's always something new coming, and the location is reinventing itself. I think we have a growing middle class worldwide, and let's put the pandemic aside. There is a life after the pandemic. People will have more disposable income. People will travel. People are up for an experience, and the region has everything that people are looking for. It has the adventure, it has the experience. Saudi Arabia, with their Vision 2030, is opening up. It has never been easier to get a visa to travel into Saudi Arabia. I know how difficult it was in the past. You needed, invitation letter, a chamber of commerce stamp here, a visa there. It was very difficult. And besides the religious tourism, there was no chance. And Saudi Arabia has so much to offer, such a big culture. And with the new Red Sea developments that are happening out there, it's amazing. The world has not seen what they will be offering. They basically bring the Caribbean and the Maldives into the Middle East. You'll have water villas, you'll have everything you can wish for. So the region has a lot to offer.
Fabulous. Michael, one last question before we bring all the panelists back together. As of April year to date, STR showed for Middle East, generally speaking, there was a decline of 2.2% in RevPAR. Now, that might not be same shop comparison because the first quarter of 2020, the world was still ticking along before everything stopped. Are you seeing better trends in your portfolio in the region? And talk a bit about the rate. Amit was talking about pricing and whether the pricing is correct. A lot of the hoteliers typically try to shift the demand by dropping the rates. Are you seeing that in the markets in Middle East?
Yes, absolutely, and that's something that the asset management colleagues don't really like because that cuts into the profits, of course. I think the demand is there, occupancy is there, but you cannot bank occupancy, right? In the end, it has to translate into cash and into profit. I mean, the occupancy is there to an expense of the rate. I mean, we have Dubai is a little bit better off than the rest of the Middle East. So Dubai has seen a RevPAR increase of 5% year to date, whereas the whole Middle East has a decline of 2.2%. We're at an average rate at $128. This is great for other regions. It's not great for our regions. We used to have completely different numbers. So having occupancies in the 60s is okay. And I mean, you can't complain. And if you complain on a very high level. But the rate is in some hotels almost down 40, 50% of what they used to have. You can be in a 5-star hotel these days for half price, and people are enjoying that. And I must say it has never been better to upsell than now because people want bigger rooms, they want more space, it's affordable. So we see that actually guests are happy to be upsold to a bigger category. But yes, we're losing out on rate. Costs are a little bit higher, which cuts into the profit margin. Hence, we need to control the cost. And there's a big difference between controlling the cost and cutting cost. Cutting cost is just saving and also compromising maybe on quality and service. Controlling the cost, and that's where the experience comes in. We as an operator have the obligation and responsibility to protect the profit margin, and that's why the owners have put us on the case. And I think Amit can reconfirm that you need to be really creative and make sure you're still delivering the experience, you're delivering the service, and I always say service, quality, consistency. Even though it's tougher now, and the profit margins of the 80s and 90s, they're gone. And it will take a couple of years to get our rate back up. Dubai had still not recovered from the financial crisis because we have 750 hotels in the city, and there's more supply coming in, and the rate can just not grow as quick as the supply grows, and the challenges are there.
So, Sam, if it's okay, let's bring everybody back in, and I'll continue to talk to Michael at this particular point on the topic that Mark had brought up earlier about talent pool. Talk a bit about that. Of course, Middle East as a region relies very heavily on foreign labor to come in. Do you think that trend will continue? And how does the industry attract people? I'll give you an example in the US, and again, it might not be applicable to emerging economies, but at least in mature economies, companies like Amazon or food delivery are paying bonuses to people to go work for them at very high hourly wages. And this gig economy has presented a competition to our industry, which seems pretty attractive by all accounts. What can the industry do to attract people, keeping in mind that it's a very thin margin business?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, hoteliers and team members, associates in all levels, whether it's line, service level line colleagues or in the management, hoteliers are known to be hard workers. They're like camels. They can go through the desert with a glass of water, and in the other industries, they know that. We're competing with banks, we're competing with other service industries. And I must say, during the pandemic, we have lost a lot of good talent that have joined other industries, not just other competitors or other colleagues. They went to other industries. So it will be hard for us to get back. What we need to do, we need to walk the talk. We need to invest in our people. Don't look at our colleagues and associates as payroll and cost. It's actually our biggest asset, and every investment, whether it's time or money you put into people, is the right investment. And we've seen now with the e-learning platforms, with staying in touch and communicating with the team members. We had team members, they were on unpaid leave. I mean, that's not a joke. You're at home, nothing to do. You have a job, but you don't earn money. I mean, this is unheard of, but this is, as we speak, what happened last year and possibly this year at some stage. And also big brands, are doing this. It's not like this is here, Mr. No Name dealing with this. So loyalty is a big thing, and we need to be, loyalty works two ways. It's not just one way. So if you want to be a preferred employer, you need to walk the talk. You need to look after your people, provide career opportunities, empower them. If you don't empower people and you micromanage them, they're going to leave.
Hey, Amit, would you have any comments on this? Because particularly in the region with foreign labor coming in, not only that the wages were there, you were also having housing costs attached to that, because most of the people were provided dormitories to house them. What will the industry have to do? Because obviously the labor component continues to be one of the largest line item in expense categories.
Yeah. Couple of things that are happening more and more. If you look at Saudi as an example, you have a lot of Saudi nationals who are moving into hospitality as an industry. This has always been the case in places like Oman, Bahrain, as an example. And I think these are the changes that we'll have to do in the way we conduct our business. Efficiencies, this region had the highest FTE per room, and it was not only because of the services, it was also to do with the efficiency and what was done. I think this is another area where training and everything else is going to make a big difference, and also what we pay for what you get. So I think that efficiency part of it is going to come in very strongly here. And moving forward, sorry.
No, please go ahead. Sorry.
No, I think moving forward, payroll as a line item, for me, I don't look at payroll as a line item. This is the team that keeps us where we are. These are the guys who work with us day in and day out to build these institutions that have become, the flagship carriers for anybody and everybody around the world. The minute you say hospitality, this part of the region stands tall. So I think moving forward, we have to take more care, but definitely efficiency is going to be key in this.
So look, this conversation about looking after the staff has been had for the longest time. We all know how critical that is. We all know how pivotal these folks are, because at the end of the day, we're in the people industry. How do we attend to the wage disparity that the industry has had? Look, a couple of years ago, it might not have been an issue. Today, it is an issue where, again, it was listed in Wall Street, an ice cream parlor that was advertising for, and I'm making these rates up, so don't quote me on it. They advertised for people to serve ice cream at $12, $13, which is typically a job held by a student as a part-time basis. They didn't get a single applicant. They moved the wages up to 20. They got 1,000 applicants in a matter of a day, and then they stopped counting. How do we get around to that, keeping in mind what Mark had brought up, that it is a thin margin business? Who pays for the increasing costs? Mark, do you have any further thoughts on this?
Well, I'll say a couple of things. I mean, potentially, Michael was talking about technology, and a lot of what was viewed as technological advancement. I remember going to an expo in Switzerland maybe almost 20 years ago, and they had fingerprint hotel room, key opening stuff, and and at the time it was very much viewed as a gimmick, and nobody really implemented this. But to Michael's point, COVID has kind of forced everybody to fast track technology and take what was gimmicks now more seriously, and kind of make them more mainstream. So maybe there's a potential there to talk about what Amit was talking about regarding efficiencies. If we can use tech, prop tech, and operational tech to make a property more efficient, reduce that FTE per key, then you'll have more money to spend. I mean, if you leave your staff cost stagnant, right? Let's say it's X%, but you reduce your staff by 20%, then you have an additional 20% per head that you can spend. So potentially there's fat in there that could be used. I don't know. This is hyperbole, but the main point that I got, which I was really disappointed that I hadn't done this myself, was that Amit managed to get the word bandwidth into his section, and Michael used walk the talk, and I'm just bummed that I missed those two key words, because that's just, if you're being interviewed and you don't use bandwidth and walk the talk, I mean, you're not worth your salt.
So, Mark, your invitation to come back on the show is rescinded. You will not be allowed.
It took you so long to invite me anyway. I kind of feel like you run out of people. You kind of, with all due respect to Amit and Michael, you kind of scraped the bottom of the barrel for me, right? I mean, everybody, all these guys I saw who were junior to me at hotel school, and people I used to mentor and stuff, getting invited on, and I'm just sitting here twiddling my thumbs.
I have a question about recruitment, if I may. We had a panel a few weeks ago, and one of the panelists is involved with the Kingdom and the Red Sea development, and she mentions that their aim at having that the nationals will represent 50% of the staffing in their developments. Where is the UAE or Dubai or Sharjah and Ajman in this game? Could maybe Michael
let me jump in 1 second on that, because that's Aradna you're talking about for sure. And what I will say is, because I know Aradna well. Well, I mean, I haven't spoken in a while, but I do know her. I watched the session, by the way. I'm your one fan. what I will
Mark,
say is the Saudi
you're
population.
on a roll, huh?
It's getting late, right? I'm running on caffeine fumes this morning. The Saudi population is a huge factor. You don't have the same kind of ratio expat to locals, so they have to have that kind of Saudi-arization or whatever you want to call it. And I was involved when I was working in Lausanne with helping get King Abdulaziz University's Kauti, the Tourism Institute in Jeddah, up and going really. And there was a really big push to try and get Saudis interested in the industry. I think the issue is the culture of service is what has been a bit of an issue in Saudi. But anyway, I'll leave Michael to answer the hard questions.
No, I mean, the kingdom cannot be compared. You're absolutely right. It's a different culture, different history. I think they just appointed the first female general manager, and there are actually not so many Saudi general managers around. It sounds good, and it's actually a rule that every GM going forward should be a Saudi, but it's not possible. They're not around. It takes probably a decade to start the program now, to have strong number twos who then can take over as a strong number one. But you have to start at some stage. The UAE is different. I mean, 80% are expats. They keep the country going. It's a different setup. We try to get a really diverse workforce. We have hotels. We have 35 to 40 different nationalities. I mean, just providing food in the staff canteen is already a challenge. I mean, you cannot please everyone, and you always have 80% who are not happy. So the chef pulls his hair, but we need to do this. We have a great general manager who's a cluster GM. He brings the teams together. They form the cricket team. I have no clue about cricket. I'm German. I know a little bit about football, but even there I'm not great. So they want to teach me cricket. We did beach cleaning the other day and said, okay, this will be the field here for our cricket. So I said, what? But you need to do these things. They have football tournaments. I go biking, so I invited some of the team members to go biking. And it doesn't matter whether you're the waiter, you're the chef, you're the housekeeper, you're the receptionist, or you're the EIM, or I'm the COO. Titles don't mean anything. You cannot lead by a title. You need to. A title is something you need to earn. I met so many people with big titles. If you remove the title, you will not remember them. And I met so many genuine line-level staff members. They became friends over years. That's what matters, It's hardware and software in life. You can have the best computer. I think probably my computer here is $5,000 of value, maybe more. If the software is crap and doesn't work, it's useless. You forget about it. So the people are the software. Hardware is what Mark puts on his Excel sheet and calculates every day, the investment. That's money. Everyone who has the money can do the deal, But the people bring the brand and the project to life. And if you don't invest in the people, I don't understand. People put multi-million, hundreds of $1,000,000 into investment, and then they negotiate the GM down for 2,500 or 5,000 dirhams to save some money. But he could make a difference in 1 second and one decision. He can make or break a deal that would make Amit happy at the end of the month when going through the P&L. You don't know what you don't know. Many investors and many owners are missing the point. So that was my 10 cents to this.
Perfect.
I think just to add to what Michael said, that's why you need asset managers who know what they're doing. Otherwise, the whole blend between what Mark does and what Michael does never comes through.
Yeah.
So let's work together. The three of us should work together with Sam-Erik and Amit being our consultants, and let's create something.
Deal.
Yeah, why not? Why not?
DNZ advisors.
Here we are.
There you go.
As an aside, Michael, quickly, interestingly, even about titles and making people GMs who don't deserve it and so on and so forth. Going back to Kauti, I remember very well when we met with the university and they said, well, in order to be a professor at the university in Saudi, you need to have a PhD. And so we had to find chefs with PhDs, which was very interesting.
Oh, wow.
We found them in Egypt. You'd be surprised what you can find in Egypt. But we found some PhDs in slow cooking and interesting things like that. So, but yeah, again, didn't make any sense.
That PhD might have been in microbiology, and the person is cooking at the end of the day. So there might be some relevance there. Gentlemen, I know we are approaching late for you, so I don't want to keep you away from your dinner and drink. But one last question, if I may. Priorities for the future. Mark, I'll start with you. If you were to list 3 priorities for the industry and for your organization, what might that be?
3, huh? Can I go last?
Well, you can say 5.
No. That's fine. That's fine. I mean, I think the green point is a very interesting one. I think also measured approach to supply, and that's something that I saw. So let's start with number 1. A kind of conscious decision to be as ecological as possible, and I think the UAE is very ecological when you strip out the energy piece. Once the UAE is producing green energy, you'll see that the buildings that are being developed here are extremely efficient. There's a lot of buildings that have been developed over the years in other more sophisticated markets. So I think green is one. Obviously, there's more green funds and things like that are coming up. So getting green financing is easier and easier. Number 2, I think capping the amount of development in the hotel space and across asset classes. I've seen in markets in Africa, particularly, where it becomes a fad, and even here it's happened with workers' accommodation, what they call labor camps in Dubai, for example. The value's fallen through the floor because it became a hot trend to start developing them 8-10 years ago, and now there's just a huge oversupply of them, and poor quality assets as well. So the idea of just sort of saying, this is how many rooms we need, and be very Germanic about it, and just kind of say, depending on what our arrivals are going to be and what the demand is going to be, this is where we cap the number of keys in the different categories and so on and so forth, to ensure that those occupancy levels and rate levels are sustainable.
Thank you.
And is that a good thing? I didn't know that. There was a third one, but I have no idea what it would be. It's
Fair enough. We'll save that for the next session. Michael, any thoughts from you?
It's got to be 3, Michael.
If it's 3 things, and my team is probably listening, they would bet now. They say Michael's going to say now SQC, service, quality, consistency, because that's what I'm praying here every day. But I'm going to disappoint them. It's actually the 3P. It's people. Again, yeah, I would say people, but let's say 1P is enough for people, means investing in them, empowering them, giving them the freedom to take decisions and move the business forward. The second is process. The second P, process, which means, okay, get the right management company on the case, get the right operating system going, get the right, the right process, the right standards going, the right brand going. And the third one is that will make Amit happy again, is the profit. So do what you can to get the return of investment. Actually needs to be more than return of investment, because if you get the return of the investment, you're changing money only. So you want more than the investment, right? So the profits. And I think if you put your ducks in a row and you apply and you focus on these 3 Ps, I think you can write a book for each of the P themes. And I think this is what matters most.
Thank you. And Amit?
So I think from our perspective as business owners and developers, one of the key factors for us is efficiency. Efficiency in the way we manage our business, efficiency in the way our teams work, efficiency in every aspect of anything that we do. Second would be delivery and consistent delivery of service standards. When we are delivering our beautiful hotels, the way we deliver it has to be consistent in quality, because otherwise we always then go to the table back and the circle continues. Team, the most important, develop the right team for the right product, for the right assets. Consistency in the way we deliver our business through the teams. And I think I will give this bonus one for Mark as partnerships, building, so that's it, I make you look good. Building strong relationship and partnership. I think in this part of the world, one thing that we have seen across board is we are good in creating value and developing strong partnerships, be it with strong F&B partners, be it with strong hotel operators, be it in every aspect of the business. The partnerships that we develop with the industry, with the local governance, I think that is very key for us as a business.
Well, thank you for that. Sam, any other thoughts or questions?
No, I think this is, we have a terrific panel who gave a lot of value, and so I think the viewers are holding their breath with their questions, so just can wrap it up.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much. Mark Dunford with Cavendish Maxwell. You can also find him at Comedy Central in the evenings if you miss him in his office. Amit Nayak with HAMA MEA, and Michael Zager with Hospitality Management Holdings. It has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for taking part in it. We'd love to have you back at a future time to talk about whether your predictions came true or not. Thanks for joining us, Sam.
I'd like to thank besides the panelists, of course, I'd like to thank all the live viewers who joined us. We'd love to see you ask some questions or comments in the future. You're very quiet and observant. But I'd also like to thank all the replay viewers who are watching this episode after we are off air. And if you prefer to listen to this as an audio version, we have a Hospitality Talks podcast also, and this will be coming up in the next few days also. And with these few words, I just want to say thank you, and I look forward to seeing you very soon again.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Amit. Thank you.